In their respective statements, China and India refrained from expressing any objection to Putin's war. Are there any new developments to report? At the beginning of this month, Narendra Modi, Xi Jinping, and Vladimir Putin were in Shanghai for a summit of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. During the discussion, the three leaders of the globe met one-on-one with one another. Putin made a first-ever public admission that China had questions and anxieties about the ongoing violence in Ukraine. He said this statement was created in response to a query. Similarly, Modi pointed out to Putin that the period in which we currently reside is not one of war. These recently developed inventions are deserving of more focus. To this point, China has shown overt support for Russia, while India has mostly refrained from voicing public opposition to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. China's backing for Russia starkly contrasts India's silence on the matter. During the meeting, Modi emphasized the importance of the value of relations between India and Russia and their historical relevance. In addition, the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs issued a statement that referred to the relationship between their two countries as being as stable as mountains. Both countries continue to buy significant quantities of commodities from Russia. During their trip to Russia earlier this month, they went so far as to participate in some of the country's military exercises. The question arises as to why China and India have been so reticent to put Russia in its proper place. Even if their reliance on Russia for defense and energy resources is the primary factor in their decision-making, my research shows that status is also a factor in their policies. This is the case even though status is not a primary factor. The perception that they hold a lower status in an international order driven by the United States is shared by both India and China, as is the perception of Russia. As a consequence of this, it is quite likely that both countries will maintain their tolerant attitude toward Moscow's goals. It is risky not to defend the current order that exists on the world stage. At first glance, economic and national security concerns might be what drive officials in Beijing and New Delhi. However, as a direct consequence of Moscow's military intervention in Ukraine, China's and India's economies are in turmoil. The conflict has caused disruptions in food and energy supplies worldwide, contributing to a spike in the price of oil and other commodities for China and India. It is fraught with danger to invest money in a country that is not only beset by war but is also having increasing challenges on the economic front. For instance, the collapse of Russia would have a detrimental effect on all the countries currently allied with Russia. The invasion of Ukraine by Russia is another factor that threatens the stability of the global order because it challenges the long-standing norms and agreements that govern the interactions between different countries. Moscow's actions have posed a danger to key examples of international law, especially those about sovereignty, territorial integrity, and self-determination, which have all been violated due to these actions. In addition, Russia has stated that it intends to withdraw from the World Trade Organization and the World Health Organization. These organizations are essential to the continuation of the current order in the international community. When viewed in this light, it is amazing that both China and India would support Putin's efforts to destabilize the charge that has made it possible for them to rise to power in their respective countries. The rise of new superpowers makes it unlikely that an entire order will receive its support. On the other hand, as history has shown, developing nations such as China and India do not just consider economic and security goals to be their top priorities. They also highly value being recognized as leading nations that occupy an elevated role in international affairs. This is another area in which they attach a high level of importance. In my most recent writing, I show that obtaining this position necessitates being accepted on an equal basis with the great countries responsible for maintaining order in the international community. When fundamental institutions of the existing international order recognize the equality of a rising country, typically by including these new aspirants in global leadership positions, they are more likely to uphold the order, even if doing so comes at a high financial cost to themselves. This is because recognizing the equality of a rising country demonstrates that the fundamental institutions recognize the rising country as having the same rights as other countries. If, on the other hand, the order excludes certain countries, then those countries will be less willing to cooperate and will fight for larger representation in the governance of global concerns. It is possible that they will feel frustrated and question the order if these demands are either disregarded or postponed for an indeterminate period. In the 19th century, the United States of America did, in fact, at one point in time hold this position. In the beginning, there was cooperation with an existing international system that was open to most people. After 1815, when a club of great European powers began to take control, the United States attempted but ultimately failed to reform international law to gain membership in the club. This was done in the hopes that it would give them more influence within the club. The United States eventually protested the order because it believed it had been unjustly excluded from the group. When an effort was made in 1856 by Britain and France to develop new regulations restricting the employment of private vessels in maritime conflict, the United States of America vehemently opposed the endeavor and refused to aid it. Britain and France undertook this effort. It was only via private vessels that the United States could compete on an even playing field with the naval powers of Europe during that period. The multipolar order is the one that China, India, and Russia would want to see prevail. As long as China and India are not allowed to join the club of great powers, there is little incentive for them to uphold laws and institutions that they did not establish and over which they do not feel a strong sense of ownership. As a direct consequence of this, China and India have little need to protect international norms and institutions. This will continue in the same manner for as long as the current global system is functional. Since the end of the Cold War, China and India have joined Russia in stating their preference for a multipolar world order, which would offer them greater involvement in the affairs of other countries worldwide. This preference was made public after Russia's victory in the Cold War. Following the end of the Cold War, this desire began to become more prevalent. At the same time, China and India both have limits to the amount to which they are willing to go in particular areas. These limits can be measured in terms of how far they are willing to go. As a result of what appears to be an excessive amount of provocation from Russia, Russia's friends are beginning to fight back, as was evidenced at the most recent meeting of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO. Both nations are probably acting cautiously toward Moscow because they feel the need to safeguard their longer-term interests as well as their desire to successfully restructure the international system without wreaking havoc on it. These are the two primary reasons why both nations are acting in this manner. We have realized via studying the past that rising powers do not idly wait for an unending period of time to have their turn in the spotlight. This is one of the lessons that we have taken away from studying history. Imagine for a moment if China and India do not obtain any sort of accommodation for the status they are seeking. In such circumstances, it is plausible that they will continue to maintain suspicion toward Western initiatives to preserve the international order against Russian overreach. If they are not given any consideration or accommodation for their status goals, then this outcome is likely to occur.